Well, let's start this 15 minutes with saying I'm vegan, so that'll be a good start. Hard to follow a comedian, but hopefully we can get slides up, and I'm going to give you a really dull 15 minutes, so no pressure here.
There you are.
More pressure now it's not loading. Oh, brilliant. Fantastic.
There we go.
Hey. So guys, a bit about Darktrace itself. So we are a cybersecurity company. Obviously, we wouldn't be here otherwise. We've got about 7,500 customers worldwide, but probably the more exciting stuff is how we were created. We were created by former GCHQ and MI5 security operatives and far more intelligent people that I can begin to imagine in Cambridge in advanced machine learning and mathematics. This was around sort of 2012, 2013 when they started this, really with the idea of actually bringing AI to security. Nowadays, of course, AI is an absolute buzzword. It's not just security, but anything you do nowadays is AI related. The key thing here was being the first to sort of bring this to the security industry. Fast forward to where we are today, we've had a whole plethora of different awards that I could throw at you, but I think what I really like is, firstly, is the acknowledgement from the Queen with OBEs from our CTO and CEO, really in recognition of Darktrace and what we've given not only to security but to the UK economy in general there. We went public as a company, which isn't great in the past year of financial crisis, but we are in the FTSE 250 and that's constantly going up and down. Unfortunately, didn't get any shares in that myself, so I care less. But the point being is it's really allowed us to help develop our growth in terms of where we are in the market. So as I'll talk about a bit here, it's not just the case of your traditional approach to security, but actually how we look to advance it and again try and stay ahead of the curve in what we do. So hopefully this will work in terms of next. Brilliant. So a bit about the threat landscape in 2022. There are a few things to highlight here. I think first and foremost, the geopolitical sort of cyber conflict can't really be ignored nowadays. You've got state-backed attacks that we're seeing quite regularly there, from leaked state secrets to Russian espionage. I know SolarWinds is probably one that most of you will be aware of there, but in particular my notes here that it was effectively US-based IT companies that effectively ended up causing damage to US government agencies there. And what I find really interesting that it's only been now that it's kind of been recognised is that the Department of Justice in the US have acknowledged that ransomware should be treated with the same level of sort of worry or vigilance as terrorism itself. Now, everyone in this room who are in cybersecurity, I think that's kind of a given, but to be taken that long to fast forward to the US to go, yeah, actually, this is quite important, really exemplifies sort of where we are. It's a lot of us are playing sort of this catch-up game with security, but hopefully that we'll see in the coming years that there's going to be a better acknowledgement, which I think everyone finds difficult with the C-suite, to go, actually, cybersecurity is something that we really need to pay attention to. Now, coupled with that, I think the other sort of main ones there are the growing increase in supply chain attacks here. So the famous ones there, sort of SolarWinds, Log4j. It's important to note with these that it's not just the case that you nowadays, it's again relying on the worry of employees clicking on something, but the reality is you've got a lot of trusted senders, third parties that you work with that, let's say traditionally, you work with a company that you met today, they're whitelisted on your email exchange, so they get through safely. That person is trusted for you. Now, if they get compromised, what's going to happen then? And it's the important things of what we do to actually stop that. Now, I'll talk about that briefly, very shortly, but I think what's really interesting is we did a bit of analysis on this, and over 150,000 attacks last year Darktrace intercepted were to do with supply chain compromises. So it's a growing increase that we're sort of seeing, especially in 2022. Coupled with that, obviously, we can't be in one of these conferences without talking about COVID. It's kind of not really a thing nowadays, but it definitely still is. But the main point being with that is the sort of sentiment of employees there. We've got this sort of mass resignations, if you like, of people moving forward. And what this also is coupled with is if you do have disenfranchised employees, I know we were talking, the talk there was about, well, you don't want to sort of make your employees frustrated with the company there. But the reality is when someone leaves, especially if they know what they're doing, who's going to stop them from actually exfiltrating your data, downloading sensitive files from you? It's important to make sure that you have something there to protect that. Coupled with that, I think that we've seen also a growing increase in the use of, say, cloud and apps that people are relying on there. From a traditional 9-to-5 working environment that was sort of 2-3 years ago to myself included, not wanting to go back more than 2 days a week. The reality is life changes, and The reliance on more of these apps means that there's more vectors of attack for sort of cybersecurity to be aware of there. So how do we manage all of those? And then the final thing that we're seeing especially is the continued evolution of ransomware. Ransomware in itself is a sort of massive thing and has been since the beginning of cybersecurity, if you like, there. But I think what the key thing is actually the growing use of AI from an attacking format. So it's no longer the case of a very targeted attack. It's an AI program that's just trying to send as many emails out to as many different emails that it can find to just get a little nibble from someone within whatever company. As soon as they get that, that's when the attack can start. So again, it's the key thing about understanding exactly what the ransomware is, but actually what types of attacks that we're looking at now. I think that we've seen it's been a bit of analysis again, tripled in terms of from 2020 to 2021 in the amount of ransomware attacks that we're seeing. And that number just increases more and more that we are looking at things. And again, that all links back to these other different approaches there with the supply chain attacks there, but also reliance on different apps, etc., that mean that there's more vectors to attack, so there's going to be more opportunity for attackers to do it. It's no longer one bloke in a hoodie in his sort of back or mum's basement in inverted commas there. It's reality. It's the billion-dollar industry, the attackers industry there, and it's what can we do to fight back against that. And this is, I think, the key thing to sort of differentiate where security was and hopefully where we're looking to move forward to now, moving forward, rear view attacks. So traditional security approaches are fundamentally based on rules and signatures, i.e. there's a good, we know that's good, we allow it through, there's a bad, we stop that, whether that's whitelist, blacklist, whether that is the case that we've got a particular set of criteria that if it's met, that we will stop something, if it's not met, it will go through. Now this is great, but the reality is that's great at stopping things that we've seen and know about. What we're seeing with ransomware attacks nowadays is they're new and novel. More and more attacks are new and novel. Whether it is the same type of idea, all they've got to do is change the coding, which I have no idea myself how to do, but the reality is there's a slight change in coding is going to bypass these rules and signatures and allow an attacker to actually infiltrate what they're trying to do there. And what this means is it lacks this visibility and context for it. So instead of looking at these past sort of siloed solutions, what we're looking to do is try and apply, okay, well, how do we actually stop this? Responses, there's a lot of response tooling out there. And what we've tend to find is sort of feedback is that can either be too timid in terms of it's going to be able to stop something, but only when it gets really, really bad, or the case that it's too aggressive and it actually stops business day-to-day operations. The reality is, and relating back to sort of the previous talk there, what you don't want to do is piss your employees off and stop them from doing any sort of email activity they're using at all, shutting their system down because they've clicked on something that it might be malicious, might not be. The reality is that's going to get more and more frustrating. So these two different polar opposites, either being too lenient or too harsh, are where we're kind of sitting at the moment. And it's important to try and find an in-between, to adapt as a sort of security attack surface changes, but also make it to a case that it's only going to take action that is needed and that is proportionate to the activity that we're seeing. And this is sort of where Darktrace is looking to come in with it. So Darktrace itself, we've created what we call this cyber AI loop. Now, it's a fancy way of saying there's a whole bunch of different things that work in a whole bunch of different areas there. Now, what we've got here is the two most recent launches from Darktrace is Darktrace Prevent and Darktrace Heal. Now, Darktrace Prevent is looking at the attack surface from the outside in. Effectively, the high-level overview of this is what would an attacker be able to see of your own network, your own sort of external internet-facing activity there, and effectively, what are they going to be able to try and utilize and target to get into your network there, whether that is sort of outdated CVCs on the internet there, or there's a publicly facing cloud that one of your employees has spun up that you're not aware of. It's all about identifying those key things so it is able to prevent before anyone has a chance to actually use these to attack your company. Then we've got our bread and butter, what Darktrace has been doing since the beginning is our detect piece there. And I'll talk a bit about this and the response piece very shortly. And then what we're looking to create is this sort of 360 effect with Darktrace Heal that we are looking to release hopefully in sort of the summer of next year. Again, this idea is to be able to take the onus off of you as the cybersecurity day-to-day users and actually identify things, detect them, respond to them, but actually then recover and heal them so that this full 360 process is applicable for you. And the important thing to note with that is the whole solution is each stage operates on its own, but together it creates this sort of effectively unbreakable bond, if you like, there. Now, there's no silver bullet, but the important thing here is it's looking to identify where the potential vectors are there. So whether that's email, SaaS apps, endpoints, cloud, your OT environments for those in operational technology as well. Every area that we can cover, we make sure that we try and do something to stop that in real time. And this is what has been able to be applied across your whole environment. So Darktrace Detect, if anyone sort of knows Darktrace from before, our enterprise immune system, this is effectively the ability to identify what is normal about your company. Now, instead of being based on traditional rules and signatures, what we're looking to do is gain an understanding of every single user, every single subnet, every single device within your network. And we do this by, again, the far more intelligent people in Cambridge and advanced machine learning and mathematics, Bayesian estimation theory. And I can't even begin to, don't ask me any more on that, but that's the buzzword that I know. But the key point being is we're looking at hundreds of different metrics of data for every single user. And by understanding what is that normal pattern of life that we call it, we can understand how people typically behave. And by understanding how people typically behave and perform, that's what allows us to spot any anomalies from that. So I kind of imagine it as a perfect circle, if you like, there. If someone was able to emulate what I do in a perfect circle for my work environment there, they're effectively doing my job for me. I don't have to worry. But the reality is, if you get a disgruntled employee who's sort of annoyed and then starts to access data they don't usually do, download large number of files, that's going to push this out of kilt. If you have a malware that is sort of trying to encrypt a number of pieces of data in the background with no idea from the normal day-to-day employee, that's going to push this normal out of kilt. So every time that we see something different from this normal pattern of life, it creates an anomaly. And that anomaly is sent to your teams as sort of a security measure, effectively saying, look, we're seeing something different. And we liken this to the immune system, I think is probably the easiest way to understand this. Your body works the same as this. Your body doesn't have set antibodies. Let's use COVID again. Before we had the vaccinations, etc., there wasn't set antibodies to fight back against it. But what we did understand is this is something different to how our body typically behaving. It's a bad bacteria, bad virus. And we get sent a message to your brain that we need to fight back against this. And it's exactly the same principle that when we deploy into any area of the environment, we look to understand what's normal so that we can then detect what is different and be able to respond to that effectively. Now, the key thing here with the response side of things is it's that proportionate response to it. So probably the sort of best way to understand this is the difference between automated response, which is very much CX do Y, CY do Z, to autonomous response, which is a proportionate action to what we're seeing. And this sort of way that sort of I like to exemplify this, it's trying to take a surgical action to stop that particular nefarious connection, but allow the daily business operations. Now, I don't remember if it was Doris or Boris or whoever that was mentioned before, but let's use that as an example again. Let's say that particular individual clicks on a bad link that downloaded a malware that was trying to then exfiltrate or encrypt a number of files on that person's particular device. Now, what Darktrace's response tool is looking to do is take action to stop that particular erroneous connection, sever that, but still allow Doris to continue her day-to-day operations. So effectively what we've got there is it's going to stop the bad, but allow Doris to continue her normal day pattern of life, if you like there. Allow her to check her emails, send their emails she usually does, allow her to access the files she usually does, but stop that particular bad thing from spreading any further. Now, if we then see that this attack is getting worse and worse, it will escalate its response. So the response is going to be proportionate to what we're seeing there that is bad. And I think with this, the key thing to know is ransomware, it's all about stopping these massive things that we see, but actually it's the smaller things that you don't realize. The whole point is we want to detect something as early as possible to take response as early as possible so that it doesn't become a ransomware incident. It just becomes a particular sort of nefarious thing that we've seen that we've stopped at an early stage before it has a chance to spread any further. Now, a few different examples here. I'm conscious of time, but perhaps the one that gives a great example to this is the case study that we have on Log4j here. Now, if you're familiar with Log4j, effectively, it started with an internet-facing server that was breached here. Now, the key thing that Darktrace identified here was straight away this was something that was different to how this particular server acted, and then was able to take action to straight away stop this and then block this particular connection for 2 hours. And then effectively what this meant is the attack was brought to an end. Now, visuals are far more exciting than me explaining it to you, so I think this is a great way to exemplify that. What we can see is on Sunday the 12th of December at 16:18:08, we identified this particular connection, and again, the AI gave explainable AI, which is important there, an explanation of what it's seeing here. 2 seconds later, the response piece was able to step in and take action to block that connection over port 88 for 2 hours. So effectively what this meant is Log4j wasn't even an incident for them. Now, we actually identified Log4j before it came Log4j, if you like, there. This is the key thing. All of these attacks that we're seeing, most of the time, are new and novel. So to be able to stop a new and novel attack, you don't need to know what it is. You just need to know it's something different, and there's an action to stop that. Now, the final thing I think talking about here, I've banged on about AI and the importance of it. The reality is it's how do you build trust and confidence in it. Now, there are a number of different ways that we can do that as human beings is actually, okay, firstly, foremost, let's trust it. But what Darktrace likes to do is, okay, what we're looking to do is escalate our reliance on AI there, eventually to the point where you have everything in fully autonomous mode. But the reality is every business is different. So some businesses like to have it in fully autonomous mode. The other side of it is some businesses only like it when they don't have their 9-to-5 workers there. So in the middle of the night, they know that the response tooling can take action to stop it in real time. But when they're there, they want to have responsibility of it. Another way that we look at this is, okay, well, let's turn on autonomous response for ransomware models. Let's turn it on for compliance-based modules. Let's stop people from doing BitTorrent, for example. But then other less sort of nefarious activity, let us make a human-based decision to understand, okay, yes, I'm happy with this. No, I'm not happy with that. It's all about trying to build that trust and confidence in AI. I think the reality of security moving forward is it's no longer a human-scale problem. We're going to be relying more and more on AI, and I think, John, you mentioned this the last time we were speaking. Actually, AI is going to pretty much sort of overtake us as human beings for a lot of things that we do in business operations. Security is first and foremost important. If you're fighting against it, you have to have something to fight back against it. And that is the key thing for AI for that. So I suppose in summary, the key thing is making it scalable and configurable to what is your business needs. And the whole point, I suppose, why we're here today is to talk to you about that. So feel free to come and find us there. And thank you very much for listening.